Yeah, ready.
Cool. What's up, guys? Josh here, back again with Bryce. And in the last video, we were just talking about activation and kind of how other muscles will all come into play during your big lifts, and how it's important to have everything firing correctly and functioning correctly in order to hit these lifts properly and avoid any sort of injury or just not even getting the lift up. One of the things I kind of wanted to go over with Bryce and kind of have him discuss a little bit more in detail is how carryover from your accessory lifts will actually have a big impact on your big lifts, like the squat, bench, or deadlift. So when it comes to a squat, because that seems to be probably the most popular exercise people on this channel like to know about, with your hamstrings, your glutes, and your quads, let's just kind of go over like how a leg extension and a leg curl and even just sort of like an RDL would have place within your squat training cycle.
Absolutely. So yeah, the squats, like Josh said, there's a lot of muscles involved, but we'll just talk about more the pelvis than anything. It's important to realize that when you're isolating a muscle group in these accessories, which is the point, is that the concept is that you're not just going through the motions, that you're trying to train this weakness. Well, what happens if your quads are strength? Like in the case of Josh, his quads are strength, but it doesn't mean that his quads are strong. They could be the weak link, they just may be the biggest body part. So the way that we ensure that all these body parts are getting stronger to assist in this lift is we get them to extremes. It's the simplest way I can explain it to you. So, for instance, the leg extension is an awesome opportunity to get those quads loaded in a completely contracted position, also in a stable environment, which is important. So when I'm trying to select an accessory move in general, most times I'm trying to select an accessory move that offers way more stability than my sport offers. So that squat is super unstable, right? It's like you, the bar, and the ground. You want to find something where you don't have to think as much and you're able to almost like take the performance part of the powerlifting away, take the function part of powerlifting away, and create dysfunction in one single muscle. Force it to get taxed and to actually work so that it learns that it has to fire through a whole range of motion very powerfully. Then that should directly translate over into the actual exercise that you're trying to improve. It isn't always that simple, but it's a simple idea. So great exercises that you can use are like leg extension for quads. The lying leg curl does the same thing for the hamstrings, gets the hamstrings to a completely contracted position. And for the glutes, learning how to hinge properly, like the RDL, or even simplifying it even more and working on something like a glute bridge or 45-degree hip extension in the hyperextension bench, as most people would identify it, can be super beneficial. The problem is you have to know how to execute those things, and that's where somebody like Josh or myself comes into play, where we teach the execution part. You can't just aimlessly go and do these movements and expect to get or yield a huge result. You have to make sure that they are efficient through all ranges of motion. Okay, the two things that I always focus on power athletes is they have to get used to this muscle working through the entire range of motion and spending maybe a little bit more time under tension. Think about your singles or your triples that you do. 20-second sets, maybe max, right? Between walking the bar out and racking it. I'd like to get that athlete used to being under tension more than 20 seconds, maybe 40 seconds, maybe doubling that, right? So that we create a little bit of endurance to that muscle, and also we're spending more time in that extreme where it could be super, super weak. In the most simplistic way, that's what we're talking about. Talking about using these auxiliary or ancillary movements or whatever you want to call them to get a muscle into a compromised position. Getting it stronger there is going to create stability to that joint and allow it to perform a little better.
Okay, and that carryover would still be good for even with your deadlift and your bench press as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And depending on where you are, in your competition season, is going to dictate how much you're undulating in volume with how much you can do these accessory moves. But I mean, if a person has an injury, they should be highlighting accessory moves a lot. That's where you're going to gain the strength to go back into those big three that you love, right? So you have to have a very mindful approach to these things, but absolutely in all forms of your training, I don't care what part you're at getting ready for a show or a meet or a competition, ancillary exercises are super, super important for the health and the integrity of the way these muscles actually function.
Okay. And when it comes to your accessory work, how much would be enough? I know it's kind of dependent based on the athlete, but what would be a good amount for the person to incorporate into her training who's maybe not used to this style of training.
Yeah, so biofeedback's super important here. So I'm always a fan of using a conservative approach. You pick a very low amount of volume and you gauge like how was that after that workout. But the best thing you can do is if you're performing an exercise, let's say like leg extension, you need to monitor how your performance is. If your performance has a drop off, that's enough, because we want every single set to be almost absolutely perfect, because you're going to have breakdown in the squat, right? If you go in and do 5 sets of singles on a squat, third or fourth set, you're going to start to have some breakdown at some point in time, right? Potentially. So when you go into these ancillary exercises, my perspective is I want these to be absolutely perfect, because I don't want to be breaking my body anymore. I want to be building it back up to make sure it's prepared and prepped to go back into my next heavy squat session or whatever it may be. So perfection in that volume is going to be your best gauge. As soon as you hit that set where the contractions aren't quite as good, you're getting lactic acid and you can't get full reps, or your execution falls off, you're done. It's time to go on to another muscle group, or it's time to call that workout quits.
Okay, awesome. And kind of what I would like to discuss next would be, where's the carryover for powerlifting into a bodybuilder's training?
Yeah, so that's a very deep conversation.
Yeah,
yes.
we're gonna kind of start to go over that in our next video.
Cool.
So.
Sounds good.